easily. It's best not. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Good morning. Thank you, Francis. When Francis Dubé assigned me this topic, I first thought, piece of cake, easy peasy. But since then I've struggled to nail this jello to the wall. So I've chosen to structure this around some scaffolding questions. These are broader questions than Charlotte Weeder was bringing us. She's given us some very specific recommendations. Mine are more philosophical, general. Since this seminar has begun, I have continually revamped this presentation, and last night I thought, oh no, I have half of their names in this, but what will Anne Clement, what will Leslie Stewart, what will Ferris Kalyali think if I don't include their names, not to mention Avery Room. So your names are all here, your ideas are here, even if they're not listed. Okay, so some of the things we'll look at are why? Why bother? What kinds of learnings are we talking about when we say pedagogical innovation? What do successful communities look like? How can we ensure continuity? And how can we plan for innovation and growth over time? So, why should we be interested in building a music community, a community of music practice? It's a big question. Community networks, I think, make it possible to imagine radical alternatives to teaching, learning, and being in the world. This kind of collective action advances social belonging and the common good. These notions are juxtaposed and often pitted against commodified individual interests and a deeply polarized and unequal world. We're very privileged here. We're from privileged places. We've got lots of money to come to a conference like this and to be able to talk in sweet peace and leisure for 3 days. There are people in the world who would love to take our place, even when it's raining here. Even if they run out of coffee, they'd be so happy. So Louise Simoni, who's a professor at early childhood at Humber College of Technology and Advanced Learning in Toronto, says, if you're going to advocate for play and change the mindset, you can be much more influential as a collective than you can working individually. And that is the power of networks. This, of course, could go on for days. We will not. What kinds of learning do we mean by pedagogical innovation? Well, there are many advocates for change in teaching, and we've witnessed examples in the seminar, lots of examples. As Andrea Creech noted the first day, some of these notions are not innovative in that they're not new. Might be good, but they're not new. But perhaps, since educational trends are cyclical, maybe this is a case of old wine in new bottles. And these are ideas whose time has come around again. Certainly, in this particular time, in this crunch of politics and technology, we could use some of the playful notions, the musical notions advocated here. So I'm going to pull from a few people who are writing now. Istens and Panagwe on 2018, described 6 clusters of innovative pedagogies. 3 of these seem to pertain to our situation. One is gamification, engagement through play and pedagogy of games. 2, experiential learning, which focuses on the process of discovery. We've seen a lot of that in our workshops. and embodied learning, which focuses on non-mental factors involved in learning that signal the importance of both the body and the feelings as well as the mind. Teach Thought from the Open University considers 10 learning strategies for modern pedagogy. And from these, I took half of them to be most relevant to our situation. They seem to be crossover learning, so it takes place in informal settings such as museums, linking issues with things that are of concern to the learners, things that matter. Another one is incidental learning, which is unplanned, may occur when you're online. Third, context learning, interacting with surroundings based in experience. 4, embodied learning, where the mind and body are both involved. And 5, this is a new one that I hadn't thought about, and I'm not so sure about, but I'll put it forward since I say it, and it's worth considering. Stealth assessment, in which data is automatically culled when students learn in rich digital environments. And this allows unobtrusive assessment, which is useful to create new challenges. I see some problems here, but it is an idea, and a good one. Margarita Romero, 2017, talks about competitive, collaborative, and cooperative play, and she describes the emergence of serious games that go beyond the simple act of playing. Jennifer Zosh and her colleagues, 2017, call for a pedagogy that is, and we've heard this echoed throughout all of the LEGO inspired presentations, joyful, actively engaging, meaningful, iterative, and socially interactive. I tried to incorporate pictures from the workshops, and I thought, I better not do this either. So here's one from not a workshop that was presented here. These are 2 children playing with cardboard orchestras in a workshop facilitated by Monica Rensick, who is an experimental game creator. And I made her to stand for the experimental game creators who are bringing forth their work here. Guided play may be a useful strategy, as Weisberg, Hirschpasek, Golnikov, Kittredge, and Klar, 2016 say. And they look at the difference between wanting to have free and open play, which is really important, but also structured play, so you have some things to work with. We've seen that here. So they talk about avoiding that false dichotomy by having guided play. And it takes advantage of children's natural propensities and abilities, but it allows them to make choices in a prepared environment with adult scaffolding and limited adult guidance. So, what do successful community networks look like? They take many forms. They are arising from individual energies and collective energies, and they take forms such as outreach with institutions, universities, religious groups, orchestras, etc., performing groups. Such networks may be ephemeral or enduring, depending on funding, personal commitment, the will, the whims of institutions, and most important, luck, an idea whose time has come. In particular, online content is fluid, and it takes pathways that may not be predictable. So here are some of the forms that community music networks can take. We're looking here at a page from the British Museum. British Museum is old, hundreds of years old. It's a public institution housing a vast collection of art and artifacts with the largest online database of any museum. It has global and project partners, One example of a partnership project which I have already touched on is the team led by Bird. It makes links between current and past children's play. And this is from the British Museum site. The team draws upon a collection of games and songs there that generate curriculum using that. They digitalize the holdings, they conduct research, they work with teachers, and they collaborate with schools. In North America, another resource-based network is the Smithsonian Institution, the world's largest museum education and research complex. There are 23 affiliated museums who associate with many partners, and these flood the market with journals, festivals, programs, concerts, exhibits, and educational opportunities. Of particular use to us is the Folkways Division. This grew from the Folkways record, founded in 1948 by Moses Ashe and Marion Distler. And Folkways had a compelling vision to record the world. Under the direction of Moses Ashe, this grew over 30 years to release 2,000 recordings of traditional, contemporary, worldwide music with documentaries, natural sounds, poetry, at an inexpensively available rate online, no, not online, by mail, on LPs. I met Moses Ashe, but he's been dead for a while. In 1988, the Smithsonian acquired this Folkways recording and has continued to expand the collections. It links to other Smithsonian partnerships as it promotes workshops, it hosts curriculum for teachers making full use of online digital mediums. This is a fairly crummy taking of a map that they have online. It's really very cool. This digital online, if you go to the Folkways site, or the Folk Life site, each of these little dots and others, you can touch on them and download free a PDF of music from that particular place using a particular piece of music which you can access. So this is generated by teachers for teachers, and it's really, really useful. I use it in my own teaching. I have my students use it so that they know where it is and what it is. It's one of a number of initiatives this group has founded. This quote is taken from a forthcoming foreword to the Oxford Handbook of Social Media and Music Learning, which I am co-editing with James Waldron and Stephanie Horsley. And we asked Hugh Shippers to write for us, and he writes so beautifully that I have to bring this to you. He writes about social media structurally changing every aspect of how we engage with music, and in ways we couldn't foresee. Changing the infrastructure and the rules and regulations, generation, transmission of knowledge, lives and livelihoods of musicians, natures of community, industry, context in which it's made, constructs that determine how we create, learn, perform, consume, enjoy, understand, and study music, while creating entirely new platforms for individual and group creativity, bringing back pathways that have been poorly served generally by the replication-focused systems of music education we inherited from the 19th century. So we have chances with online, offline convergent teaching and learning practices to change how we think. We already have. It's already happened. 20 years, it's already happened. Some community networks are centered around innovative music pedagogy, and they are performance-based. And some of these are university and orchestra outreach. So one example that I'm pretty familiar with is the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra ACE program, or Arts in Community Engagement. And this program was initially set up to generate curriculum for cooperating public schools. The teachers would use the materials in their classes. They'd have guests come in, they'd take a field trip to the orchestra. And the program built up so that it engaged the entire school and all of the schools that wanted to be in. And so there was curriculum generated specifically for each grade, and then specifically for the materials that were going to be played by the orchestra that year. 24 years ago, when I was a curriculum writer for this program, that's what it was. It was just the orchestra and the schools, plus a few random university-affiliated researchers, I was not one of them, who documented the process and wrote papers about this. It's now celebrating its 28th year. Currently, it partners with 24 organizations, and these include the American Indian Center, a Latin American trio, a ballet company, the Tuba Throat Singers from Tuba, or Mongolia, an accordionist, the Dance Circus, which you see here, which is here creating, this year creating dances based on monarch migrations and creating awareness of this issue in the world for the children. Also the Vancouver-based Orchid Ensemble. And if you go now on the Orchestra Ensemble site, you will see they're touring all around Vancouver and in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, because that's their partner. So they're drawing on local and also global partners, and the curriculum continues in complexity and now diversity as it reflects both the richness of a local culture and reaches out to global partners. I have heard it said that orchestras will save school programs, but I don't believe that. I'm a teacher, and from my perspective, this is the case where strong school music programs gave this particular orchestra focus and a mission for inclusivity. Now, we've seen 3 fully formed stable community networks based on resources and performance. But I would be remiss if I ignored the many short-term networks, such as one university school community partnership that I am involved with in London, Ontario. Very briefly, it takes place in a nanosecond. And this project uses space for inspiration. The Kiwanis Club of London, Ontario installed a sound sculpture in the park at the end of my block. It's lovely to walk there. You watch people play, all ages of people play, all kinds of people play. And the chimes and the drums, they drift out, the sound of the river, the birds with the geese. Very nice. It was inspired by a university school community partnership that has started last year in the imagination and has been continuing. It has now got a title, the Sound Sculpture Park Project, Recombining Creativity and Musical Imagination in Public Space. And the title was inspired, and a lot of the work on the grant that we wrote was done by Jason Edwards, who is doing and who is facilitating the group-led compositions and improvisation innovation. So from March to June this year, these graduate students, Tricia Edwards, Carolyn Bloomer, originally from Brazil, who's a music ed, and Daniel Gardner, who is composition and also percussion, a graduate student, are facilitating workshops with 8th grade students at the local French immersion school. And they're working with Alexandre von Warburg, who is also an adjunct faculty member in bassoon. And it came about when I met him having coffee and we began to talk about research, and he said, well, what good does online things do to me? I'm working with 8th graders. And so then I began to think of how we could work together. So anyway, these current visits prepare students to collectively imagine and compose their own music to be performed on the percussion sculpture in this park. We also have community teams, and their names are here. And so we'll do this thing and it will be done. But then I'm taking over, we're documenting, analyzing, and then maybe presenting, hopefully presenting, the findings next year at Symphony in Finland. And raising money to do this, God help us, we hope. But we were doing this anyway. However, we're thrilled to have seed money from SHRC through a university grant that we just got. Okay. That's a small network. It will dissolve. It will disappear. Many, many things are like this. And they're good. How do we ensure continuity in what we envision? I think it comes down to these factors. I'm sure you have other ideas. I know you have other ideas. There needs to be a compelling idea, a spark, capital, and tensegrity. Continuity and stability are not stable things. There are many factors. It is essential to our vision. As well, it's important to be practical about what can be done. Alex Ruthman volunteered that the network start small and build infrastructures. And there may also be serendipity involved. Fran Hanna described in our first roundtable how musical futures took off, sparked by teachers sharing online, growing from a small funded project to an international movement. And under 20 years, I hope I'm not taking your thunder. No. Okay, good. Because all I'm taking from this is there was a vision, an idea that addressed a need, and then a spark was an idea whose time had come. The capital and the infrastructure, I mean, it's laid out very like we should do this, and then we should do that, and this and that. I don't think it happens that way. I think suddenly there is a miracle. Things come together, and then people scramble, and stuff happens. As well, I need to suggest a metaphor of tensegrity for any collective effort. Buckminster Fuller coined the term in the 1960s as an illusion of tension and integrity. And it was inspired by Kenneth Snelson's sculptures. And that indicates those situations where the integrity of the structure derives from the balance of tension members, not compression struts. So it has tensional integrity. Mitchell Robinson from Michigan State University first used this in his dissertation to describe partnerships, drawing on his experiences with the New Horizons band that linked community and university. And I think that tensegrity is an apt metaphor for any negotiations and tensions that necessarily attend membership in many communities. And I well recall when beginning a coffee house, a dozen of us sat in a circle and talked about our mission statement. And we hammered out every single sentence. We fought like cats and dogs over this embracing notion of bringing music to a particular time and place. But it worked. 40 years later, they just had their birthday party. I couldn't go, but I'm going for the 41st. It's still going. It still runs on nothing, a shoestring. It still runs on fumes and tensegrity. Lots of fighting, lots of wrangling. multiple points of view, floating in a balanced sea of tension. How can we plan for innovation and growth? And this is the last part, I think. Yeah, I think this is it. It would seem that stability, continuity, and successful practice can work at cross currents against innovation and growth. Factors such as bureaucracy, ethics boards, transient personnel ebb and flow of interests, and shifting pedagogical imaginations are persistent challenges. Here's an image from Laura McKenna's artwork, which represents the kind of the cross-current forces that we always face. But there are ways to encourage overlapping projects which build creative opportunities. And here too, an overarching vision is needed to allow the shorter, smaller stages of development nested within the overarching structure. The network can be seen as an ecosystem, which predictably has seasons, cycles of growth and stagnation and rebirth. If the network commits to offering an open source musical engagement games, it should definitely plan on a timeline. Dijon, Martson, and Roth, 2016, make some points about collaboration and networks. That collaboration, you have to be smart about it. You have to invite multiple perspectives and new ideas, fresh critiques, and to take close stock of who you're working with, to limit some things to a certain size while making it available to others to use. It may be as important to prune as it is to extend, and to know that everyone needs to gain from this experience. Goodwill, without skin in the game, without buy-in, does not promote stability. It's important to be transparent in processes and to take care, etc., etc. And final thought for online content. The online components must be necessarily permeable and transferable so that people can access and use the ideas. They can take the ideas and they can change them and use them for their own purpose. As my hero, Henry Jenkins, has noted, if it does not spread, it's dead. Jenkins, Lee, Kaskoff, and Green elaborate on the ways in which online partnerships interact and how they repurpose, reshape, take over material, use what they need. Now, back to the 5 questions. And I look forward to our next dialogue as we continue to engage with the ideas of music community networks based on innovative pedagogy. Thank you.
It's loud. So do you have some questions about the presentation we just had? It can be very helpful to think about our network.
I need to say also that last night at 1 o'clock in the morning I was thinking, how do I include all these people? How do I include them all because I meant to? So if your name wasn't here, I meant to. Okay?
Some questions? Yes.
When you talk about these ephemeral networks, are they planned as a project and then they have a planned end, or it's just that they end up that way? The networks that are shorter lived.
They seem, oh, well, the networks that are short-lived, we're all part of some of them. They can be teaching ideas. We're going to do a little project in our class. We're going to do this thing. This started out, as I said, you were talking about the network that was short-lived that I talked about?
Yes.
Okay. It began on my birthday last year when I went out with a friend for coffee and sat down next to someone who looked kind of familiar and his wife, and we began to talk. And he began to kind of tell me about the troubles he was having with his 8th graders. And he was trying to work them through being band members in the early stages. That's very hard, a hard slog. But he's a wonderful teacher and a fantastic musician. And I said, well, suppose I put you in touch with my graduate student who does composition. So I tried to put them together, and they didn't get together until this fall. Whereupon it turned out that Alexandra had also been a composer, but then was discouraged from doing that. And when he saw what Jason could do very easily with a classroom of students creating soundscapes and taking ideas and having them work in small groups and just pull things out of the air, it was amazing. He began to come up with his own ideas. So then it evolved that the other people were on board. And then I noticed that there was a grant floating around. And then I thought, well, great, we've got something going here. Why don't we study it, which is what I do. So we'll put it down, we'll study it, and we'll take it to Finland. So I wrote the grant, and then they started. And the Kiwanis Club had a lunch for us, and we talked about it. And the London Arts Council was on board with us. But how do they start? Usually face-to-face. I don't know of any that have started online. I'm sure you have other ideas.
Yes?
I can probably. It's whenever great ideas come by, the first thing is that, like, where's the time, right? And it seems to me that, as you're saying, with the multiple nodes, somehow we can hold each other up through that. Little bits of participation. What are you expert at? What is someone else expert at? And really this idea of a collective. But I also think there needs to be, like, the core team that champion it, that do some of the work in between, because it's not like everybody can drop everything and make this their #1 priority. So I'd love some discussion on how, as we move forward with this, what are the strategies to overcome that scarcity of time?
Well, it's the main challenge.
But it has to be formed in how we build structure.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is a big reflections to do behind that before to start it, and how it can be possible, and it must be founded. And we will need someone to animate it and create a kind of interaction between people, and also one of the ideas came out, we will talk about it this afternoon, but one of the ideas came out from the round tables is to work around projects, based on the interest of everyone. So we can have different projects, and it's the people who will participate to that who will know how much time they could put on this project, on that. And we will see. It doesn't have to be big also. It can be small, but I think the idea, it must be helpful for people. Yeah. Yeah. You want to add something? I'm sorry. You look at me so... I'm very sorry. It's because you look at me so I answer it, but the question was...
I would have said just like I would have said interacting with other people. You can find ways to do this. But also, we've looked at things that are of a bigger time span than just working with small children here. We've looked at lifelong learning. And we've looked at things that don't just benefit music learning in theory and learning in this or that, but also feed into other aspects of life, such as the amazing prosthetic hand that was brought forward.
Okay, thank you. So we can continue the discussion during the coffee break. So we'll take 15 minutes to relax a little bit, and we'll come back with Fran. She is at the head of a fantastic network about musical futures. So she will talk about it.